Hello everyone, today I'm going to explain to you why our HOGHUNTER mini clip-on device doesn't need a counter ring when attaching an adapter. Today I received a few emails saying that someone is panicking again. On the internet, on YouTube, people are saying you shouldn't buy our device because it doesn't come with a counter ring. That's why I'm going to explain this to you now from a technical perspective. In the past, we also had products from the company guide in our lineup, and back then there weren't these modular adapters either. Or eventually there were, but at the beginning they didn't exist yet. So basically, you had what was called an ARM adapter, which had threads on the inside. This one here, for example, has a special thread for guide M33.5. But often people would just take a large adapter and glue in the threaded ring. So the threaded ring, I don't know if you can see it properly, basically doesn't have a stop here. That means I would have screwed it in all the way without a lock ring. Screwed in all the way to the stop. The disadvantage now, as you can see in the video, is that the lever is pointing downward. Of course, that's totally impractical. If I turn it upward now, to position it, the whole thing would be loose. Additionally, by the way, if I screw it in all the way, it presses against this element here. And this is basically where the parallax is set at the factory. That would obviously be bad if there was pressure on it. So that was just a look at it for now. That's why so-called lock rings were included. It sits right here. Next, we simply take it and then we screw it tightly onto this spot. Not all the way to the stop, just a little bit like this. Then this was screwed on here. Then you checked, here we have the center position, then you aligned it like this, locked it slightly past the center, and then pulled it over a bit more. Then it was fixed in place theoretically. But you kept having the issue that the whole thing would twist within itself. So we used a lock ring with a set screw in it, and that made it significantly better. But even then they kept coming loose. The problem was we had sold thousands of the TAs, and we really did, but also hundreds that were returned because of point of impact issues, simply because the lock ring came loose. So the idea with our HOGHUNTER devices, here for example the HOGHUNTER Mini, was to only offer them with two-piece adapters, that is, with the MAR system, which of course also works for precision hunting. And here you have the so-called M40P, which stands for positioning, meaning this connector that goes on here with these screws for positioning. And here the thread has a stop. That means I take the whole thing now, you can position it well like this, and then I screw it on, and bam, I'm at the stop. It's important that when tightening, the screws here are slightly tightened. If they're too loose, you could over-tighten it. If they're too tight, I wouldn't be able to screw it on. So now I'm really at the thread stop. That means my specialized thread ring component, which sits directly inside there, basically takes on a shape that looks exactly like this, and now essentially has a physical stop. It is now securely and firmly fixed in its intended place, and actually, if you don't turn it very much at all, it simply couldn't come loose on its own anymore under normal circumstances. Now you loosen the screw here slightly again. Position it, we want to. Align it to 12 o'clock like this. Then you tighten the whole thing, and then you really tighten the screws firmly. Really, until you feel, okay, it won't go any further, like that. Of course, not with a huge lever so that you break the screw, but really with some tension. Now you've got the whole thing positioned. And these screws, they don't press directly onto the thread of the device, but underneath there's this threaded ring. The threaded ring gets so much pressure and deforms slightly, just minimally. That's why it sits on there so tightly. Nothing is going to come off anymore. I don't even need a lock nut for that. That means the thread also has no play because I've screwed it in all the way to the stop. This way, the outer ring is secured against twisting. The inner ring is also deformed by the pressure and secured against turning as well. You really can't get it off. If you do it properly, it won't come off at all. No problem whatsoever. So, and now for those who want it even more secure and even easier to install, there's the so-called PE. E stands for extended version, where the inner ring is a bit larger. That means you screw it on, just as shown before. And then, in addition, you can use this lever tool to basically screw it further into the thread. Screw it in, it really sits absolutely tight there. Now it's also available for an extra 25 euros. As I said, even with the standard system, if you use it correctly, you don't have to worry, not even after hundreds of shots, that it will ever come loose.